Hello, America, how are you? In a time when suspicion, misinformation, and division threaten to unravel our shared story, we believe it's time to listen again. Here on the Voices of Americans, we gather real people for real conversations, sharing truths, not headlines. Stories have always been the heartbeat of change, and like the words etched into our currency, e pluribus unum, out of many one, we believe that by listening to one another, we can remember who we are and imagine who we might become. This is the Voices of Americans. Hello, America. How are you? I have three amazing women here who are powerful in their own right with stories to tell and share. So I'm excited that they are gathering here with me today. Each have participated in the mental wealth story groups, and this is the first time these three people have met one another. So part of the exciting adventure of Voices of Americans has to do with people encountering one another and finding that we have more in common than what divides us. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask each person to introduce themselves and say a little bit about where they live, work, and play. Dr. Billie Boyd-Cox, would you please go first?
Great morning, everybody. Again, I am Dr. Billie Boyd-Cox, and I am here in the suburbs in Georgia, and I am the founder or the principal of Beyond the Walls Coaching and Consulting, and I coach women. I coach women because that's where I'm rooted and grounded because I am a woman, and I believe that I am called and assigned to that. And this topic that we're going to talk about today, showing up in your own story or show up in your own story, is it's powerful. It's about our lived experiences. It's about unlived experiences. And for me, Melissa had asked about the three words that kind of defined us. It is hidden, it is boxed in, and then it is freedom. That I had to find my own freedom and I had to find it my own way, because for so long as women we show up as mothers and wives and sisters and girlfriends and all the other things. We show up in those categories where other people need us, but we oftentimes fail to show up in our own stories, and we each have a story to tell.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Truth?
I'm Dr. Ngonzi Truth Crushshon from Chicago, but I reside in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm a HBCU grad, Fisk University, twice, bachelor's and master's. And I am a licensed eligible clinical psychologist, and my practice is Dr. Truth and Associates. And I recently started Dr. Truth Coaching in 2022. The way that I show up in my own life for myself is sacred self care. So that is definitely a new guiding principle and core value for me. And I was 40 something years old when I learned to put myself first or in the center of my own universe.
Thank you. Reverend Dr. Susan Taylor?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all your faces and to have the opportunity to be with you today and to learn from you. So, I'm an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, second career, retired. I say refired. The world is my parish. I'm a teacher, always knew that I was a teacher. I'm a leader, always have been, always will be. I bring order to chaos. I'm an administrator. I will stand up for the truth and for justice and risking whatever it takes to make sure that that happens, that the truth is told, and working so that justice can be done. Oftentimes behind the scenes, sometimes out front, coaching, mentoring, leading people to do that, and helping people to learn that we all have the abilities to do that. I'm authentic. What you see and what you hear is me. I don't pretend to be anything else. And I'm a lifelong learner, and I enjoy and love people.
Thank you. Well, this is an interesting way to have a podcast where people meet each other for the very first time. And I really like the first meetings myself when I'm leading groups because you can see people's connections going off when they start hearing words and looking for phrases. And, one good story begets another often. So I'm gonna ask you, since Dr. Billy, this was your theme that you proposed about showing up in your own story. I want to ask you what's at stake when a person doesn't show up in their own story.
When you don't show up in your own story, you fail to live. I believe that you just exist. You are almost like a puppet on a string. You're moving at somebody else's direction. You're moving in spaces that other people are moving you into, and not of your own volition. You are a shell, not your authentic self. When you fail to show up. When I think about stories in the Bible. There is a story about a queen who, though she had come into the kingdom, she was not a person of authority, not herself. She was there for the service of the king, and her people were entrapped. They were being set up and to be extinguished, so to speak. And her uncle or her cousin sent her a message inside to say, you know, you need to do something about this. And I'm paraphrasing. You need to do something about this. And she says, oh, well, the king hasn't sent for me. If I go to the king and I have not been invited, those who do that die. And he says, okay, well, if you don't do it, another answer will come in some other way, but you and your people will perish. You and your people will perish. And so she decided that she sent him back a message and said, okay, call for a fast, do this, do that, and I and my maidens will fast, and then I will go before the king. And if I perish, I perish. And I think that the reminder is that you are not living your best life. You are not showing up in your own life. You are not being who you're supposed to be because you're fitting in the box that somebody has placed you in, or you have decided that because sometimes as women, I think that we pick the places that are the least confrontational, particularly for me. I know that I did. I picked the places that were least confrontational. Being the least confrontational means that I'm going to go along whether I agree with what's going on or not. Being non confrontational means I'm going to accept what you project instead of inserting my opinion, my thoughts. So I think it's imperative for us and incumbent upon us that we show up as who we are created and designed to be. I remember I was in a marriage that was not a healthy marriage, and I actually remember the first time that I heard myself, that I heard my voice say, no, that's not what I want. That's not what I'm agreeing to. And that was after a long period of time of being in this marriage. And I literally heard myself, and I had not heard myself for a long time because when you fail to show up in your own story, you are then just going along to get along.
Hmm.
And I was no longer willing to do that. I heard myself, and hearing myself say no caused me to wake up.
Wow, that's powerful. So you have an internal moral compass that just that knew where I can't go across this line. Well, I think that we're all facing that kind of challenge right now in our lives in various ways. Can you recall a story, either Susan or Dr. Truth, where you did have this moment of clarity, like she just described, and it was powerful for you to listen to that internalized moral compass, and even if your voice shakes, you spoke and it made a difference?
I can think of several, but I'll think of one because it will kind of add on to what Billy was saying. When I was working as an associate pastor in a very large suburban church, it came to my attention that one of the small group Sunday school leaders was basically spending the first, which most of them would, the first few minutes of the opening of the class, in addition to announcements and things people needed to know going on in the church, also gossiping, sharing things that really weren't true. They were rumors that were getting a lot of air and loud voices in the congregation. And I found out about it. I grew up in a family where it was safe to have arguments, to disagree, to do so loudly with passion, and to know that even if we disagreed and after all was said and done, we were greatly loved. So I'm not afraid of confrontation. So I sent this man an email and asked him if he could find time for us to sit down and have a conversation. And he agreed. So he came to my office at the church and we talked. I opened the conversation by asking him, how are things going in his life? What, if he mind, could he tell me what was happening in his life? Prayerfully thinking and asking for God, the divine, to let me know what was happening and what was happening with him, because this type of behavior was not normal for him. And he just was quiet for a while, and he looked at me and he said, my company is transferring me and I have to move. My family and we have to move. I just recently let my family know. They're not happy about it at all. And I haven't let anybody in the congregation yet here know. I understand I have to do this. I cannot say no to this move, but I'm having a hard time with it. So we went from there to letting him imagine and talk about some ways that could get better, and in what ways could I help, or what ways were there people in the congregation that they were friends with that might be able to help, and how could we imagine it getting better. After that conversation, we prayed together, and he was very grateful that I had taken the time to talk with him. And I didn't tell him during the conversation that the reason I brought him in was because of what was happening at the beginning of the Sunday school class. And it was causing problems, and it was unlike. So he apologized and said that he knew that it would stop. And it stopped. I think that's just one of the places where I can share that it was scary. And yet I knew that with kindness and concern and care and love, that there was something wrong. And he needed a space where he, perhaps, if he was willing, he would share. And he did.
Good.
Before we jump into Dr. Truth, can I chime in right there?
Please.
Just because what Dr. Susan was saying, she talked about the family of origin and how it was a safe space. Growing up in a not so safe space, it was a learned behavior. It taught me how to just fit in, to go along. Such a great difference when you grow up in a family that is loving and supporting and available, and when you have one that is filled with chaos and dysfunction. And it teaches you want to stay out of the way of child abuse. You just,
yes.
So that family of origin is an important place to begin to deal with and navigate. Who were you raised up with? How did they raise you? What did you experience? And what part of that did you bring with you into your adulthood? It's really, really critical.
Yes.
It is critical. And you have to do some healing work around that if you have.
Yes. I totally agree with you. I would never want to paint a picture or depict a version that my family was perfectly, and yet a loving family.
Yeah.
That not being abused, never being abused, being loved. I think it wasn't until I was a new teacher in high school that I learned most of these students in your classroom have never been loved. And that really hit me hard, because I had grown up in families that were very much like mine. I learned in my 20s that most of the fear I don't know how, I'm not sure if this is a correct word. I want to say disruptive, but it's really seeking attention, maybe not fitting into the order of the classroom. I'm searching for words here that aren't all time labels. And what I learned was most of these students, it was family origins and things that went on that I never experienced in my life. That said a lot to me and it meant a lot to me. And so I had a lot to learn.
Let's bring you in here, Dr. Truth.
Transformative experiences were experience for me. I would say it's the shift of my job closing down. The first job that I ever had in mental health was a community mental health center. And that was stability. I came from a family that was like, we lived in the same household my entire childhood, loving, things like that. So I'm used to stability. I'm used to order. I'm used to consistency. And so for an organization to close down, and I believe in my lifetime, that was the first recession I had ever dealt with where corporate organizations were losing funding and closing down, and it was affecting probably millions. So that was when I was in Chicago. That led to, again, me thinking I was saving my home, but then losing my home because my things were hacked. So just two major safe places were now affected for me, and I'm in young adulthood, so straight out of a master's program, maybe 5 or 6 years out. And this is my first career move and position. And so, what does that mean for me to have to recreate stability with no stability? And so, my dad is a pastor, and my mom is the first lady. So, you know how they say you got to know God for yourself. So, I believe that that was the beginning of me knowing God truly for myself, because that was the first, I guess, two major crises that I had ever dealt with as an adult on my own. I was living in my own place. I was working and making my own money. And so that was, I would say, chaos and confusion that I had never had to face before. When you're worrying about where you're gonna eat and where's money gonna come from, and you are the helper, and your family, like you said, Dr. Susan, like your family is the one that helps others. So who's going to help you? And then you want to save face and embarrassment and shame and all of that. So I had to make decisions about how do I, like Dr. Billy says, authentic, transparent is the word that I use. So how am I still going to be aligned in my word, thoughts, beliefs, and feelings, and still continue while I'm also in the line for food stamps and unemployment as my clients, that because I was still a therapist. It was a definite transformation of thoughts, of beliefs, of where do I go for safety, and where I went for safety was church, and I got a new relationship with God. And that's when I learned how to worship and cry and fall on my face. And now I know what it means to lay prostrate. Like nobody had to teach me then. It was just, whoo,
You got it then, huh?
let's go. So that was also where I would say was the pivotal point of me changing from traditional Christianity to New Thought. I no longer believe that I was only a sinner. I now believe that I was an heir to the kingdom, that I have God qualities in me, and that
Absolutely.
I am all that God is. And I have power, because sometimes we believe in the external, like things have power over us. Now I was shifting my beliefs to I have power over my environment. I have power. Even if it feels like I don't, I still have a choice. And so I chose to worship through the worst part. And I would say worst circumstances in my entire life.
So that was profoundly shifting for you then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to just because I know that people were going to be curious if by watching you, can you kind of say something about the frame that you have around your face and the backdrop and
Okay, this is my therapy office. This is my virtual therapy office. I provide therapy and coaching online, and I also have the feelings wheel behind me.
Mhm.
So I help my clients identify their thought, their core belief, and their feeling. And so I believe that the core beliefs is where the root work is done. And so sometimes as therapists, we're only taught to deal with the leaves, which are the feelings or the behaviors. But we can't successfully deal with that without dealing with the core beliefs that we've been operating from and how we identify and feel that we have power and control over our own lives, how we feel about others, even about safety, like I was sharing. If you feel unsafe, it's going to be certain things that you do, and because of those beliefs that the world is unsafe, that I'm unsafe, or that if you have lack mentality, so I don't have enough, there's never enough. So now I'm going to hold on tight to everything because I feel like it's not enough when it's more than enough. It's more
Mm.
than enough food, it's more than enough money, it's more than enough wealth, is more than enough. Everything, ideas, creative ideas. And so if I believe that way, then I can shift my trajectory in life. My clients can shift their trajectory in life. So it's like as I shift and transform, my clients are also shifting and transforming. Me as a therapist has shifted and transformed because now I believe different.
Yeah.
I appreciate you bringing that word shift into the conversation. As you know, I use that acronym to talk about the three layers of storytelling. I'll just talk about the first one, the personal layer of stories about where we live, work, and play. The shift is stories heal insecurities, forging trust. Shift. Yeah, it is important to do that root work. I appreciate you bringing that up too. I like that you use the color wheel always as a representation of the power of our own narratives, really. I never thought about the difference between the core values that we hold and the core beliefs. Sometimes that root work, I think, is what I hear you saying, is where you go in and you challenge the core beliefs because some of those are stories that we learned from our families of origin where we took something in internally and we don't even know that it's a belief. Sometimes that becomes a limiting belief. How would you speak to that?
So, we talked about the cipher before. And so I teach my clients how to cipher. So cipher is from 106 in Park for other generations. The 106 in Park was a show that was a cipher. Then there are two people. Usually they're young men. Sometimes it's young women that come and they are making up words, wordsmith or rap, spoken word against each other. It's usually to kind of like call the other person out or to show off their wordsmith skills. And so I challenge my clients. I said, what would you do if you were in a cipher and you had these limiting beliefs or somebody was calling you out and talking about you? So maybe even saying your mama and you're never gonna make it and things like that. You're not just gonna stand there and walk away. They say, well, I'm just gonna take a nap. Okay. So you're taking a nap, but all these people are around you, they're watching you, they're booing you because you just got clowned. So how do you respond to those negative beliefs? And so then it's like they get the picture and then they're able to say, okay, well, I'm going to say this. And I said, well, are you going to say it in that tone? Are you going to say it like that? Well, who are you going to scare away with that? Like your belief is not even going to blow away if you say, I don't believe that. And just a funny way to share the story. And so I just saw the movie. It's called The New Avengers, but it's called something else with a T, Thunderbolt. And so I just saw that movie yesterday, and they literally have the different characters that are the new Avengers having to face off with their child trauma and their child
Really?
and those negative beliefs, limiting beliefs that are talking back to them and or keeping them stuck where they are. I think that is amazing.
That is amazing. Thanks for bringing. So you're spelling this cipher, S.
Cypher.
Thank you.
And it's almost like embedded theology. You kind of
Mhm.
believe and you just stay right there, and there's no other, like your periphery. You're looking with a myopic view, and you just see straight ahead because this is what I've been told, this is what I believe, and I don't want to challenge what I believe. But you can't grow unless you challenge what you believe. The embedded theology tells you that this is the way it's always been done. So let's just keep doing it this way. Even if it's painful, let's just keep doing it this way because this is all I know. And I don't want to learn anything new just to help you move forward. We have to begin to use our deliberative theology and deliberative thinking in order to be able to move forward. One of the things that really helped me, and it's not, I was afraid of it when I first heard it, but I heard it in my spirit. I heard it with my heart. I heard it with my ears. I believe Holy Spirit saying to me, "You're a big deal." And when I heard it, it startled me because I've never thought of myself as being a big deal. But again, that's because of the embedded theology, being told you're not this, you're not that, or whatever the chaos was. But to really come to the understanding, I've done a lot of first, a lot of great things, received a lot of rewards and awards, and never really thought that I deserved any of that until the Spirit said to me, "You're a big deal." Then I had to wrestle with that, even to receive that, because the humble side of me says, "Oh, you can't say that out loud," or "Don't start walking like you're somebody." I mean, I had that internal wrestle with myself that I had to rise above, and I had to really go back and look at everything that I've done, everything that I've accomplished, and said, "Oh, yeah, I am a big deal." That's a lot. Even coming from where I came from, going through all the stuff that I've gone through, that's a big deal. And so I'm a big deal. And have to constantly remind myself that I'm too important to be segregated, separated, or hushed. Because
Yes.
if I do those, I'm not going to show up in my own story as my authentic self. And if I'm not able to show up, then I'm not able to help the people that I've been assigned to.
Right. Yeah, that's well stated. So what are you sensing between you? Since this is your first time to meet, what have you heard each other say that resonates somehow with something in you?
Well, for me, listen to Dr. Susan talk, and the boldness and the strength and the courage in her is like water to my soul.
Good.
Like
Good.
to my soul, that there was something out of whack in the room, and you addressed the elephant that was out of whack in the room, if I can say it like that.
Mhm.
In addressing that, you gave space and room for the other person to come to grips with who they are and what they were going through in a non-judgmental environment. And for
True.
you are the example of transformation.
Mhm.
Grew up with parents who are in ministry, but then you realize that your life came to a point where you had to chart your own course. Not that you are separating or disagreeing with what your family is doing, but that you are charting your own course. And sometimes, particularly as women, we don't take out and chart our own courses. We go on the path that has already been created. I had to learn that about myself, that I'm a pioneer. I'm a trailblazer. And I learned that when Holy Spirit said to me, "You're a big deal." I had to go back and look at the things that I've done. I was the first female pastor at a church that was 138 years old, a Black African American church with deacons. I was there for 8 years, and in the pandemic, I resigned because it was just too much. Too many people were dying, and I had to protect my own mental health. So I'm getting the energy from the two of you that is just like water for my soul. So thank you.
That's
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
That's what got me to Atlanta. Too many people were dying in the church, and I said I cannot be in this low vibrating atmosphere anymore. So I
Yeah.
made sure that my mom was okay and my dad was okay, and then I moved to Atlanta. And then I did some more of that laying prostrate, crying, and doing my own grieving, because sometimes as leaders, especially women leaders, and I'm gonna say Black women leaders too, sometimes it is not even in our vocabulary or
Mhm.
repertoire to rest, relax, or release,
Mm.
I,
because we're
Yeah.
always putting everybody else before us,
Yeah.
whether that's the congregation, our family, our
Yeah.
parents, our
And
children,
work.
our spouse, clients, anybody,
Yeah.
anything. dusting, cleaning the house. I tell my clients now, forget the laundry, forget those dishes, and you take a nap. Or you do your self-care, you do your prayer meditation time, because it's some things that, again, when Jesus talked about Mary and Martha, who did the better part? Somebody was up in there cleaning and cooking, and the other was sitting at the feet of Jesus. And so we need to do that, because that's where our strength comes from. That's where our nourishment comes from. That's where the refilling the holes that are in our souls and that unhealed trauma comes from. We have to seek God and then everything else. So I just think it's just so full circle that I was taught all this in childhood, and then we kind of stray. And then I come right back and get a new coach that teaches me the same thing. And what's the secret? The secret is daily divine meditation and prayer with God. I'm like, God, you are so funny. You are so funny, because you think it's getting the degrees, it's getting the house, it's getting the job, it's getting whatever that we think, it's getting the man, it's getting the relationship or the marriage, or it's the children. But it's always something else next and next and next. But the real fulfillment comes with that connection with God. That's where the peace comes from. That's where everything, all the answers come from. Everything that we need is there, but we forget it. I forget it. And that's separation from God. So when you say separation, segregation, and hush, yes. But that is the definition of sin. When we forget and we think that we're separated from God, and we're not. We're one with God. And when we remember that, then everything else, seek God first, and everything else will be added.
This is powerful.
I think so too. And I wanted to just chime in right there too, because what I hear Dr. Truth saying is that we got to remember as women to pull ourselves together, because we've been all the things to all the other people, all the titles. We've just been being, but we've not been in our own stories. And we've been hanging out in supporting roles that when we are really called to be the main character in our own stories. And so this just reminds me, that it's okay to put myself first. Of course, I'm going to serve and worship God, but it's okay to put me in the plan of the day. It's okay to write me in what I'm planning to do today. I got other folks that I got to do stuff for, but it's okay to do stuff. It's okay to make sure that I relax. It's okay to make sure I rest. It's okay to make sure I release. It's okay. I deserve it. We do, particularly as women, because we carry a heck of a load. So as women, I think it's incumbent upon us to really, really make sure that we give ourselves what we need. We're givers naturally, and we are giving and pouring. And we find, particularly for me, I found myself during the pandemic like an empty pitcher. I had nothing left to pour, and I had to find space and time to get back in the presence of God and allow Him to pour into me. And I had to connect with other people, other women, to allow them to pour into me as well. Sometimes you get to the place where you don't want anybody to know that you're in this space. And so you walk around barren and hurting and in pain. At some point in time, you have to come where you take that mask off. No purpose. You got to leave the makeup and the eyelashes and I'm happy and life is good on the table, and admit my sisters to help me to be pulled up. I need to be lifted.
What do you hear them saying, Susan, that resonates with something in you?
There's so much. I was raised in a neighborhood in Atlanta outside of the city. Well, it was in the city of Atlanta, but in Southeast Atlanta, in a Southern Baptist church where my mother was raised Baptist. My father was born in a house across from what used to be Grant Park in Atlanta. He was raised Methodist, but I think they became Southern Baptist. At this little neighborhood church, the pastor and his family mirrored my parents and our family, children's age, gender, and everything. And we would go on vacations with them. So basically, though, I was raised in a church that pretty much took the Bible literally, grew up memorizing scripture and being taught some things that as a teenager I began to question. But when I was about 5 years old, we were on vacation with this pastor's family, and the deacons of the church voted him out of the church. And so when we came back, my father, who was a deacon, but was a supporter, of course, of the pastor, wasn't there. And he probably would have turned that vote. And that's why they did it. And so from that point on, my parents didn't go to church. They quit going to church. They were done. Now, that doesn't mean that they quit being Christians or that they didn't have faith, but they quit going to church. I continued to go to church. I liked church. I was a child and I would go with my neighbors. I went to a different church. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I really began to question a lot of things. And of course, I grew up during the 60s, during the civil rights. I can remember interpretations and things said by my parents to me about what the Bible said about Black people, what was said in the Bible, of course, about what women's roles were, and, what the Bible had to say about Jewish people. And as a teenager, I began to question that. I also remember my parents saying to me very clearly that, they didn't understand all this to do about slavery. They never owned any slaves. And I remember hearing that and thinking, well, okay, but that doesn't make it go away. And this is as a teenager. And then in my late 20s, I had an aunt and a cousin that did the family tree for my father's side of the family. And in addition to finding out my maiden name is Martin, or French, Martin, that we come and traced it all the way back to the 1600s to a French Huguenot minister. Also found out that basically my great-great-grandfather was a captain in the Confederacy and was one of the largest slaveholders, in Carroll County, Georgia. Yeah. Now try that on for size and see how that feels. And it doesn't feel so good. It didn't to me then when I was in my 20s. It certainly probably wouldn't have felt good when I was questioning everything in my teenage years. And I read the Bible through for myself when I was about, 13, 14. It was a translation called The Way. And I remember thinking to myself as I was sitting in another Southern Baptist church, the one I went to with my neighbors, how there's a lot of things going on in this Bible that nobody in this church is ever teaching or preaching about. And I could say that to my father and to my mother, even though they disagreed. We had great conversations about it. And so I learned a long time ago that, I'm about as imperfect as somebody can get. And I got a lot of crazy stuff in my family. And so I don't need to be judging people. And there's a spark of the divine in me. There's a lot of stuff going on here that nobody's been telling me, except no matter what, my parents always told me, we love you. And they always told me, whatever you make up your mind that you want to accomplish, go for it, do it. And so that's kind of how I've approached life. When I hear people say that I'm bold, I am. When I hear people say that I'm confident, I am. I always describe myself as a jet plane. I got about 4 engines. One of them burns all the time. When I turn on the other ones, it's called get the hell out of the way. And I don't care. I'm serious about this. It doesn't matter to me if there's anybody standing with me. It doesn't matter to me at that point who's going to get hurt, because at that point, I know that it's up to me. And that story of Queen Esther, it's my time. And if I die, I die. But by God, we're riding. And if nobody's with me, I'm leading. And that's me. And what I know about myself is that's powerful. And what I know about it is it scares the shit out of people. And when it's a female doing it, it really scares the shit out of them. And I've learned that in my life, and I've learned how to use it. I've learned how to tamper it down. I've learned how to make friends who probably are very much against everything I represent, but I know that I can talk with them. And then once they realize who I am, they're kind of stuck.
Well, you've officially made this video now explicit for age purposes. so thank
Sorry.
you. The last one before you also had to mark that way. Yeah, so there's some powerful kinds of feelings that come forward. Speaking to feelings, Dr. Truth. when you get in touch with your own voice and it's divinely inspired or encouraged. So I value the trajectories of each of your lives. And I know that you are all three working around issues of mental health, but you seriously ground that in spiritual health. And I know that there's a lot going on in the world. Some of it you just have to let go because you have to stay grounded within your own truth and within your own ministries and in your own vocations. But some of it needs to be challenged because there are some limiting beliefs. So, could you name succinctly some of the truths that you bear witness to challenge the limiting beliefs that are in that part of that root work that you're talking about, Dr. Truth, that needs to be done?
I'm gonna assume you're talking about what's going in the world right now, going on in the world right now.
Right.
So I'm going to say that one of the truths that I bear witness to right now for me is that God is in control. God is my source, and everything else is a resource. So the government is a resource. With the government, some organizations closing down and departments closing down, the chaos and confusion that may be happening. The government also sits on God's shoulders. So God is the ultimate. Law and order, divine order is my truth. I'm actually and have been praying for the world for the last 15 days. And so that's where my power is. That is my empowerment when I feel like the world is unstable, unsafe, or things like that. Another truth is that I limit news that creates or can bring about fear-based thinking, fear-based feelings, things like that. So I may listen to the BBC and I may listen to NPR for balanced news, but I do not invoke or listen to news at the beginning of my day or at the end of my day because I don't want to go to sleep with that on my mind. I don't want to wake up with that on my mind. I start my day with inspirational, gospel, uplifting music or Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, like something that's high vibrating and that's going to keep me lifted for the work that I need to do in my everyday life with my clients, because my clients are actually feeling this. I have several clients that are government employees, and I have to offer them hope. And if I'm a part, we are called out to be transformed. So if we're the same as our clients or the same as everybody else in our family, then what hope do we have? And so we got to stay close and stay prayed up and stay worded up and apply the word. So the word is a way. We take captive every thought and we make it obedient to Christ. That's the same thing as challenging those core beliefs, but that's just doing it via scripture. And so I challenge every thought that is not like God. I challenge every decision that comes from government that's not like God. I challenge everything that comes that's not like God, and I make it obedient to Christ and the truth about me, the truth about others, and the truth about the world.
Very good. Now I have to interject this because we just had as you were praying for the world, we had a new pope. We lost one pope, and I know you're not Catholic, none of us are, but there's something to be said for a pope coming out of Chicago.
Yes, hometown.
How about that?
Yeah, really.
But we know that as some die, others are born and others are raised up. And so sometimes if we look back in the Bible, when there were plagues, but after the plague came freedom, after the plague
Freedom.
came Moses parting the Red Sea, after the plague came so many different things. And like we talked about before, Dr. Melissa, in our talk, that
Yeah.
after slavery came some things, after the civil rights movement came some things, and it also brings about community, stronger ties to our community. And so we've never only relied on the government ever.
Oh,
We've
no.
always relied on our village, on our community, on our family, on our relationships, on these bonds, on our churches, on other organizations that are in our community, Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, NAACP. So it's always been that. So we're getting back to that. Even when it's the worst of times, we connect in new ways, and then it's gonna be something good. It's always something good that comes out of everything. That's another truth. Something good is always happening to me and for me. Everything is working for my good. That is a belief, not just an affirmation. It's a belief.
That'll preach right there. Thank you. And it's a good solid mental health strategy as well. So, yeah. Dr. Billy, you want to say something next?
My mindset is, and I don't watch mainstream media news. I don't. I go to other sources, world sources, to get the news. And one thing that I realize when I'm watching it is that I'm looking for information. I'm there to get truth and to get the information. And I realize that even as I sit and listen to this, and I only want a small dose of it. I'm not getting it like first morning, late at night. I only want a small dose of it because after you keep repeating, it becomes embedded in me. I get enough to know how to move forward and how I want to navigate and what I need to pray for. And one thing dealing with what's going on today is I realize that I'm not helpless because Jesus is my help. I am not helpless. The Bible tells me that at the mention of his name, that everything under the sun, under the sea, that they all have to bow. And so when I hear stuff that has the potential to distract or disturb me, I just mention his name, find my peace, and keep moving forward. I find my peace and I keep moving forward. And I try to be a beacon of light because that's what we're supposed to be. I try to be a beacon of light and point people to where the light is, because if you listen all day to all the different competing media outlets, you will end up depressed. It could cause people to go out and start shooting up this facet or that facet or driving into crowds. It could cause all kind of chaos. My goal and my thought process is get what you need. I say it like this: get enough to be dangerous. Dangerous in making sure that you give good information, that you give good encouragement, that you pour into whoever you see or meet that might need something else today. And I apply it to my own life, like, this is the day that the Lord has made. I shall rejoice and be glad in it, not worrying about what's going on around it. Can't do anything, but he says that we can cast all of our cares on him. And so I'm constantly casting my cares on him so that I can stay in the right mindset, so I can stay in the right mood and still be aware of what's going on, but not allowing what's going on to dictate how I live my life and how I.
You have some closing thoughts, Susan?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. In this world today, especially in this country, and we so need people who are encouragers and who are persuaders and leaders and teachers. And we need women, powerful women. I'm convinced that one of the reasons, I call it the institution of the church, I call it organized religion, that has been run for thousands of years by men with women in the background and not always speaking the truth or teaching what is the truth, because it's powerful. The gospel is dangerous and it's power. And that's not what it's been used for. It's mostly been used to scare people and make people fearful. We have people that would like to do that in this country and make that happen by government. The spirit in me says, no, resist. It's got to be a big hell no. And there have to be people that see you willing to do it, and they will come along and people will listen. And I know people will. So for my day is, okay, put me where I need to be. Put me with people who need to see and hear and know what I can share with them, and help me to listen and know them so that I know what it is they need to hear today and that I might provide that. Because although I feel powerful and know that I am, I got to have people with me. If I don't have people with me, then we aren't going to accomplish what the truth, the good, the holy that has to be done. It's not just for me. It's for all the people that are being harmed by self-serving, narcissistic, evil people. And if we don't stand up against it, who will? So that's our work. And nobody ever said it would be easy. But you know what? I love it. And I'm glad that I can do it. And I'll continue to do it. And I always tell my family and friends right now in these days, if I disappear, remember El Salvador and Guantanamo.
Okay, I don't know what to say after that.
Just the way it is. And, I am grateful for each and every one of you. You're beautiful people, and you're real, and you're powerful, and you're something good and big, and you're doing great things in this world. And I'm glad I know you now.
Well, hopefully, if we can get our foot in the door in some of these corporate settings and workshops, we may not be talking so much about religion or faith, but of course, that's the grounding to try to help people access and get into using their own voices and discovering the core values and core beliefs and realigning with that corporate family in a way. I know you've been through those 9 sessions that I've trained you through so that you can help co-facilitate and build out as we get contracts. I just want to thank you all for showing up here today and for showing up in your own stories in the ways that you have, sparking some curiosity. We could have 4 or 5 other podcast episodes after this one because I'm sure you've got some wheels turning. I know, Dr. Billy, you made me think about some of the women characters in the Bible stories that I relate to, and this will not come as a surprise to you, but I relate to that aggravating widow who knocked on the judge's door and harassed him so much till he finally gave way. That's who I identify with. So, as one of the women characters, but there's always, there are always these subtle stories of empowerment and using your voice. I mean, the first preacher, of course, was a woman because she went and said, I have seen the Lord and he is alive. And, the women, even though there are not as many stories, there are several in the biblical text that do kind of illustrate and model some ways to be activists, to be empowered, to use your voice even if it shakes, and to live authentically and to live your truth. So yeah, so thank you for showing up here today. Any final thoughts?
I'm gonna say perfect love casts out fear.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Because I heard fear, but we know that love is the highest vibrating and the highest, most powerful